Dusty's burden. Dusty scanned the horizon, the dawn's early light splashing the plains with molten gold and vibrant orange. Another daybreak on River's ranch. A fortunate one by most standards. The herd, a thriving sea of beef, grazed peacefully on grass still slick with dew. From atop Rebel, his stout quarter horse, he took it all in. A prize holding this. Testament to years etched in sweat, resolve, and unwavering commitment. Yet a certain hollowness lingered. He urged Rebel onward, the saddle leather groaning beneath him. The north fence needed his attention, a safeguard against wandering cattle. Shadowing his gaze with the brim of his hat, he acknowledged the wealth surrounding him. It breathed in the beefy low of his cattle, pulsed in the taut wires strung across the expanse, stood proud in the ranch house silhouetted against the skyline. Still, it couldn't resurrect what he'd lost. His inspection revealed no breaches. Instead of turning homeward, he guided Rebel west, toward a small enclosure crowning a desolate rise above a parched creek bed. Clara's sanctuary. Dismounting, he approached the simple wooden cross marking her forever home. Time had weathered the wood, faded the paint, but the small clutch of wildflowers he'd planted years ago still dared to bloom, defiant color in the dun landscape. "Mornin', Clara," he croaked, his voice catching. He hadn't voiced her name in what felt like eons. Uttering it still carried a sharp, physical ache. "Just looking in on ya. Things are much the same. Ranch is prospering. Wish you were here to celebrate." His calloused hand traced the smooth grain of the cross. The silence was a heavy blanket. The wind sighed through the brittle grasses, a mournful lament mirroring his own. Kneeling, he cleared encroaching desert scrub from her wildflowers. "Remember that squall we got caught in?" he murmured, a fleeting smile gracing his lips. "Creek went wild, marooned us for days. You brewed the finest damn coffee I ever tasted, right there over a fire in the downpour." The memory flared, bittersweet and sharp. Those were good, unadorned days. Days overflowing with laughter and affection. Days now vanished. He rose, dusting off his worn jeans. "I gotta go, Clara. Work calls." A final touch to the cross, a silent vow of remembrance. Back on Rebel, he pressed on westward instead of retracing his path, deeper into the arid heartland. The terrain grew unforgiving, vegetation scarce. The quiet intensified, broken only by Rebel's hoofbeats drumming on the baked earth. He rode for what felt like eternity, the sun a hammer on his back, the wind a constant lash. He sought escape from the ghosts, the loneliness that clung like a shroud. He sought oblivion in the stark beauty, a measure of solace within its desolation. But the desert offered no absolution. It acted only as a mirror, reflecting back his own emptiness, his solitary existence. The endless tableau of rock and sand loomed before him, a vast testament to the magnitude of his loss. As twilight bled across the heavens, painting vibrant strokes of crimson and violet, he finally turned Rebel's head toward home. The loneliness still weighed him down, a crushing burden, yet he knew he could not forever flee from it. A ranch demanded his attention, his responsibilities pressed. He had a life to command, even if it was forever shadowed by the past. He spied the faint luminescence of the ranch house on the horizon, a beckoning beacon in the encroaching darkness. Nearing, he made out a solitary figure standing on the porch, outlined by the golden light spilling from within. "Sarah," he urged Rebel into a trot. What kept her up so late? And why did her presence, even at this distance, spark a tentative flame within him, a sliver of possibility amidst the barren landscape of his heart? The thought both beckoned and terrified. A shack in the desert. The sun beat down on Dusty's back, each drop of sweat a testament to the relentless desert heat. He squinted, the horizon shimmering ahead like a heat-induced mirage. He'd been tracking stray cattle all morning, pushing deeper in a land he rarely bothered with. It was barren, choked with scrub brush and stubborn rock, not fit for man nor beast. That's when he saw it, a smudge on the landscape, a darkness against the bleached earth. He nudged Buck, his trusty horse, forward curiosity prickling beneath his sun-baked skin. As he drew closer, the smudge resolved into a shack, or what was left of one. Weathered planks sagged, held together by sheer will and rusted nails. The roof was a patchwork of corrugated iron and tattered canvas, offering little protection from the elements. Dusty dismounted, the leather of his saddle creaking in the sudden silence. He approached cautiously, hand resting on the butt of his revolver. No smoke rose from the chimney. No sounds escaped the warped wooden door. Just a stillness that felt wrong. He pushed the door open with the toe of his boot. The interior was dim, the air thick with dust and the faint scent of despair. His eyes adjusted slowly, picking out details in the gloom. A rickety table, a single stool, a threadbare blanket crumpled in a corner. And then he saw her. A woman huddled near the back wall, her face buried in her knees. Her clothes were faded and patched, her hair tangled and dull. She looked small, fragile, like a desert flower struggling to survive in the harsh landscape. "Hello." Dusty's voice was rough and used a softness. She flinched, her head snapping up. Her eyes, wide and haunted, met his. He saw a flash of fear, quickly masked by resignation. Who are you?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "Dusty Rivers," he said, his gaze sweeping over her. She was thin, too thin. He could see the sharp angles of her collarbone beneath the fabric of her dress. "Are you all right?" She shook her head, a single tear tracing a path through the grime on her cheek. "No." He knelt, his joints protesting the sudden movement. "What's your name?" "Sarah," she whispered. "Sarah Meadow." He waited, letting her decide if she wanted to say more. She didn't. Dusty stood, his gaze hardening. "Where's your husband?" Sarah flinched again. "Gone." "Gone where?" "To town," she said, her voice trembling. "To drink." Dusty knew the type. A man who'd rather drown his sorrows than face his responsibilities. He sized up the shack again, taking in the meager possessions, the bare necessities. This wasn't just neglect, it was cruelty. He found the man at the saloon, predictably slumped over a whiskey bottle. He was a small, wiry man with a mean glint in his eyes and a 5-day stubble clinging to his chin. Dusty grabbed him by the collar, hauling him to his feet. "You're Sarah Meadow's husband?" The man blinked, his eyes unfocused. "Yes, so. I'm buying her." Dusty's voice was flat, devoid of emotion, but held a core of steel. The man laughed, a harsh, grating sound. "Buying her? What makes you think she's for sale?" Dusty's grip tightened. "Everything's for sale. Name your price." The man considered for a moment, a flicker of cunning in his eyes. 500. Dusty didn't blink. He pulled out a wad of bills, peeled off $500, and shoved it into the man's chest. "She's mine now. If I ever see you near her again, you'll regret it." He left the man sputtering in the dust and headed back to the shack, the setting sun painting the sky in hues of orange and purple. He didn't know what he was going to do with her, but he couldn't leave her there to rot. He'd bought a woman, thrown away by her husband. Now what? Welcome to Rivers Ranch. The truck shuddered to a stop, and Sarah's gaze swept upward, not toward the house, nor the taciturn Dusty, but across the panorama laid out before her. Rivers Ranch wasn't a mere ranch. It was a realm, undulating terrain, a patchwork of verdant and golden hues bisected by the river's gleaming ribbon, sprawled to the horizon. The invigorating air tasted of pine needles and rich soil, a world apart from the stuffy confinement she'd known. Dusty cut the engine. "So," his tone was rough-edged, yet tinged with a subtle vulnerability. "What do you think?" "It's breathtaking," she managed, the adjective falling short of the reality, failing to encapsulate the sheer scale and majesty. He grunted noncommittally. "Yours is that way." A nod indicated a copse of trees cradling the river's edge. A plume of smoke danced from a chimney. The cottage, though more compact than envisioned, possessed an irresistible charm. Fieldstone walls, a steeply angled roof freckled with moss, and a porch swing beckoned with understated allure. A small, unkempt garden hinted at a connection to the land. Dusty jiggled a key in the lock, the tumblers responding with a rusty groan. Been empty. Esme airs it out, though. He swung the door inward, revealing a single room, sparsely furnished but impeccably clean. A time-worn rug lay across the plank floor, a small table nestled beneath a window framed by the river, and a stone fireplace anchored one wall. Sarah crossed the threshold, her first tentative step into a new chapter. "It's perfect," she breathed, conviction ringing in her tone. Dusty shuffled his feet. "Esme's got supper on. Been excited to meet you." He stuffed his hands deep into his pockets. "Don't expect much. She mothers everyone." Sarah offered a wan smile. "I don't mind being fussed over." He steered her toward the main house, a sprawling edifice of weathered timber and rock. From its windows billowed the intoxicating scents of roasting meat and fresh-baked bread, a siren's song to her gnawing hunger. Esme, her face a tapestry of wrinkles earned through laughter and toil, greeted them at the entrance. Her astute, dark eyes softened as they landed on Sarah. "Bienvenida, Sarah," she announced, her voice a warm melody. "Welcome to Rivers Ranch. Come in, come in. You must be famished." She embraced Sarah, a hug redolent of cinnamon and wood smoke. Dusty remained a step behind, seemingly at a loss for what to do with himself. The kitchen pulsed as the heart of the home, a lively space echoing with the comforting sounds of sizzling food and clinking silverware. A long timber table dominated the room, appointed with mismatched china and gleaming cutlery. Esme guided Sarah to a seat. "Seat, seat. Dusty, stop hovering and pour the tea." Dusty complied, his movements surprisingly delicate as he filled a fine porcelain cup. The meal was unpretentious yet exquisite. Roasted chicken, creamy mashed potatoes, and a vibrant salad of garden produce. As Sarah ate, Esme showered her with questions, her gaze unwavering. Not intrusive, but gentle inquiries about her journey, her passions, her aspirations. Sarah felt herself unwind, her shoulders shedding their habitual tension. Esme's warmth soothed her weary soul. Dusty ate in near silence, picking at his food and observing them both with an indecipherable expression. Afterward, Esme insisted on a tour. Dusty excused himself with a mumble about chores. Strolling through sunlit rooms, Esme paused before a framed photo on the mantel. A young, beaming Dusty stood beside an older couple. His parents, Esme murmured. "Good people. They'd have liked you." Sarah's throat constricted. "Thank you." Back in the cottage, the quiet pressed in. The cozy glow of Esme's kitchen felt impossibly distant. Sarah unpacked her few possessions, carefully arranging them in the narrow wardrobe. The act felt pointless, rearranging furniture on sinking ship. Could she truly build a life here? Could she place her trust in Dusty, this enigmatic man who had given her sanctuary? Could she even trust herself? Doubt churned within her, a tempestuous and unsettling squall. She approached the window, watching the river shimmer in the moonlight. Rivers Ranch, a beautiful prison, a gilded cage. And she felt ensnared, again, by forces beyond her influence. She closed her eyes, inhaled deeply, and murmured a silent plea for the strength to meet whatever the dawn might bring. Finding purpose. The first days were a disorienting blend of fatigue and apprehension. Sarah navigated the ranch house like a wraith, shrinking from Dusty's presence, convinced she was merely a burden. But Esme, with her perceptive gaze and comforting touch, gently nudged her towards activity. "These chickens aren't self-sufficient, Mija," Esme declared, a twinkle in her gaze. "And that fence won't fix itself. Hands like yours shouldn't be idle." And so, Sarah found herself in the henhouse, the morning sun illuminating floating dust particles like golden rain. She murmured to the hens, their gentle cooing a soothing balm to her raw nerves. She collected the warm eggs, their shells a mosaic of browns and creams, carefully arranging them in the basket. Simple, repetitive, the task grounded her, made her feel present. Later, hammer and wire in hand, she patrolled the pasture's boundary. The wind playfully lashed her hair as she assessed the damaged sections of fencing. She'd assisted her father back home, a skill now resurfacing unexpectedly. The rhythmic thwack of the hammer against the wood, the satisfying bend of the wire, filled the silence with a sense of accomplishment. Dusty observed her from the porch, leaning against a time-worn post, a cigarette perched between his lips. He hadn't offered more than necessary words, yet he watched. He saw the quiet resolve in her movements, the surprising competence with which she wielded the tools. He noted the subtle smudge of earth on her cheek, the determined line of her mouth. This wasn't the fragile woman he'd rescued from town. A resilience shone through, a spark he hadn't anticipated. He extinguished the cigarette in the dirt, a tightness easing in his chest. He hadn't desired her presence, hadn't welcomed the complication. But witnessing her industry, her contribution, a flicker of something approaching hope ignited within him. Perhaps, just perhaps, he hadn't committed an irreversible error. As twilight descended, painting the sky in fiery hues, Sarah joined Esme in the kitchen. The fragrant steam of chili hung in the air, a comforting aroma reminiscent of a distant, almost forgotten past. "You possess capable hands, Mija," Esme's voice rumbled as she tended the simmering pot. "Hands accustomed to labor. That's a treasure." Sarah flushed, unsure how to respond. "My father showed me a few things," she mumbled. Esme chuckled warmly. A father should impart more than just mending fences. He should instill strength, courage. Did he do that? Sarah paused, memories swirling. Her father had been a decent man, but life's hardships had layered over his tenderness, burying his affection beneath layers of anxiety and weariness. "He tried," she said softly. Esme nodded in understanding. "We all do. But sometimes, Mija, we must unearth our own fortitude. We must learn to repair our own breaches." She paused, her smile etching deeper lines around her kind eyes. "Tell me about your father. Tell me about your home." And so, Sarah began to recount her past. She described the small farm, the endless fields of corn, the pervasive aroma of baking bread. She depicted her mother's vibrant garden, a riot of color, and the serenade of crickets on balmy summer nights. With each word, a lost fragment of herself resurfaced, a forgotten piece of the woman she used to be. Dusty lingered in the hallway, drawn by the sound of Sarah's voice. He couldn't discern the words, but the cadence held a lightness absent until now. He saw her form silhouetted in the doorway, bathed in the kitchen's warm glow. And for the first time since bringing her here, the weight of his choice didn't feel unbearable. He felt something unfamiliar, something that kindled a long-slumbering hope within his weary spirit. He turned and walked away, allowing her to her recollections, granting her space to discover her purpose, permitting her to heal. Perhaps, just perhaps, they both might find solace. The Dust Bowl cometh. Whirlwinds of dust, miniature demons, danced over the cracked fields, an omen Sarah couldn't ignore. Fissures, like a fractured mosaic, spread across the baked soil of her once thriving garden. The corn, once a vibrant emerald, now sagged, tips crisped and brown. The very air rasped, a gritty film coating the tongue, an ever-present reminder of the land's desperate plight. Dusty shielded his eyes against the glare, a permanent furrow carved between his brows. The azure sky had dissolved into a jaundiced haze. He spat, the sound lost in the heavy quiet. Even the breeze seemed suffocated, leaving the air stagnant and thick. "Doesn't look good, Esme," he rasped, his voice a dry scrape. He found her in the kitchen, tending a simmering pot that smelled faintly of want and dried beans. Esme didn't glance up. No, it doesn't. The well's scraped bottom for weeks, lower than even Abuela remembered, and she knew drought. She spooned a meager offering into a bowl, a sigh escaping her. "The cattle are edgy already. They sense it." Dusty leaned against the frame, arms crossed, a silent sentinel. "Rations start now. Water for the house, water for the herd. Nothing squandered." Esme nodded. "Already started. But for how long, Dusty? That's the question that claws at my sleep. How long before the dust itself cracks?" Sarah drifted in, her complexion ashen. She held a handful of withered herbs. I tried to revive them. Her voice faded, unable to meet his gaze. He pushed off the frame. Not your fault, Sarah. Nobody to blame here. Except maybe himself, a nagging voice insisted. For his blindness, for his lack of foresight. Sarah approached Esme, offering the herbs. Perhaps a tea? To soothe the heat. Esme accepted them, her gaze softening. Gracias, niña. Every crumb helps. She patted Sarah's hand, a silent comfort. Sarah hesitated, then whispered, back east. Grandma showed me ways to conserve. Strategies from the dry years. Rain catchers, ground cover, reusing rinse water. Dusty turned, his scrutiny intense. Rinse water? From washing, the sink. Not for drinking, but for the plants. And ground cover locks in moisture. Sarah's voice strengthened, shedding its hesitancy as she described constructing basic collectors from salvage barrels and crafting mulch from fallen leaves and straw. Dusty listened, his skepticism receding. He had underestimated her before, seen only a fragile bloom. Now he recognized something else. Resilience, resourcefulness, a hidden strength. Those catchers, how many could we manage? His tone was gentler than usual. As many as we can, she replied, meeting his eyes. Every drop matters. Dusty nodded, a spark igniting in his eyes. Then we start now. He looked at Esme, then back to Sarah. All hands. We need everyone. The afternoon sun hammered down as they put Sarah's ideas into action. Dusty, surprisingly handy, helped Sarah position the rain barrels under the eaves. Esme, despite her years, lugged containers of rinse water, guided by Sarah on where best to use it in her failing garden. The labor was grueling, the heat relentless, but a shared purpose settled over them, a quiet resolve to push back against the encroaching desolation. As the sun dipped, stretching long shadows across the barren expanse, Dusty paused, wiping perspiration from his forehead. He looked at Sarah, her face smudged, her eyes alight with a new vitality. For the first time in what felt like forever, he felt a stirring beyond fear. A fragile bloom of hope, perhaps. Or maybe, just maybe, something more began to unfurl within him. Secrets and solutions. The air hung thick and heavy, the relentless sun beating down on their backs as they wrestled with the rusted well pump. Dusty grunted, his muscles straining as he tightened a bolt. Sarah, her face smudged with grime, held the pipe steady. They worked in a companionable silence, the rhythmic clang of metal against metal the only sound besides the dry rasp of the wind through the parched fields. He'd been surprised when Sarah had offered to help. He'd figured she'd want nothing to do with the back-breaking labor. But she'd shown a grit he hadn't expected, a quiet determination that mirrored his own. And he had to admit, her smaller hands were better suited to some of the finer work. Almost there, he said, his voice rough but not unkind. He wiped sweat from his brow with the back of his hand, leaving a streak of dirt across his forehead. Sarah nodded, her eyes focused on the task. Just need to secure this last piece. Together, they managed to fit the final section of pipe into place. Dusty primed the pump, his hand heavy on the lever. He pumped once, twice, 3 times. Nothing. A knot of frustration tightened in his gut. He was about to give another try when Sarah placed her hand over his. Easy, she said softly. Sometimes you just have to be patient. He looked at her, surprised by the gentle conviction in her eyes. He took a deep breath and pumped again, slowly this time. A gurgling sound echoed from the depths of the well, followed by a rush of cool, clear water. A collective sigh escaped them both. Relief washed over Dusty, a lightness he hadn't felt in years. They'd done it. Later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of orange and purple, Sarah was cleaning up in the small room he'd designated as hers. Dusty leaned against the doorframe, watching her. She moved with a quiet grace, a stark contrast to the rough-and-tumble life of the ranch. He noticed a small, leather-bound photo album lying on the bedside table. Curiosity piqued, he stepped inside. Sarah turned, a flicker of surprise in her eyes. I didn't hear you come in. He gestured towards the album. What's this? She hesitated, then shrugged. Just some old photos. Memories. He picked it up, his fingers tracing the worn leather. He opened it, his breath catching in his throat. The first picture was of a young woman with bright, laughing eyes and wind-tossed auburn hair. She was beautiful. An ache, familiar and sharp, pierced his heart. It was Clara. Sarah watched him, her expression unreadable. She's beautiful, she said quietly. Who is she? He swallowed hard, the words catching in his throat. Was. Her name was Clara. She was my wife. He hadn't spoken her name aloud in years. The sound of it felt foreign, yet achingly familiar. Sarah's eyes widened slightly. I didn't know. He closed the album, his fingers gripping it tightly. There's a lot you don't know about me, Sarah. He looked away, unable to meet her gaze. She stepped closer, her hand reaching out to touch his arm. Dusty, she said softly, what happened? He hesitated, then sighed. The need to share the burden, the crushing weight of his grief, was overwhelming. She died. Arrêt d'un accident. A flash flood came out of nowhere, swept her away. He closed his eyes, the image of that day seared into his memory. The raging water, the desperate search, the crushing realization that she was gone. He opened his eyes and looked at Sarah. He saw not pity, but understanding in her gaze. I tried to save her. Sarah squeezed his arm gently. I'm so sorry, Dusty. He looked down at the photo album in his hand, then back at Sarah. I loved her, he confessed, the words raw and vulnerable. I know, she whispered. It's okay to miss her. He met her gaze, and for the first time, he saw a flicker of hope in his own reflection. Maybe, just maybe, he wasn't as broken as he thought he was. Maybe, with Sarah by his side, he could find a way to heal. The drought still raged, but standing there in the fading light, Dusty felt a small seed of hope begin to sprout in the parched earth of his heart. Barlow's shadow. Barlow arrived in a cloud of dust, his polished boots gleaming incongruously against the parched earth. He found Dusty mending fence, the rhythmic clang of hammer on metal a stark contrast to the silence that had settled over the land. Dusty, Barlow drawled, stepping out of his polished Studebaker. Figured I'd check in, see how you're holding up with this dry spell. His smile didn't reach his eyes, which were sharp and assessing, like a hawk eyeing a field mouse. Dusty straightened, wiping sweat from his brow with a forearm that could fell an oak. Holding up fine, Barlow. Thanks for asking. He didn't offer a handshake, didn't invite him closer. Heard you're running low on water. Tough break. Barlow's voice dripped with false sympathy. Maybe there's something we could work out. I've got resources you don't. Dusty's jaw tightened. I'll manage. He returned to his work, the hammer blows ringing with a renewed intensity. Barlow lingered a moment longer, his gaze sweeping over the ranch, a predatory gleam in his eyes, before finally climbing back into his car. Just saying, Dusty, don't be too proud to ask for help. Sarah watched him drive away, a knot of unease tightening in her stomach. There was something about Barlow's visit that fell wrong. She'd been sketching wildflowers near the creek bed, enjoying the fragile beauty that stubbornly persisted despite the drought. Now, a sense of foreboding settled upon her. Later that afternoon, as the sun beat down with relentless force, Sarah decided to ride out to the spring, the ranch's primary water source. Dusty had mentioned he was worried about the levels, and she wanted to see for herself. She left a note for him on the kitchen table, not wanting to cause him concern if he returned before her. The spring was nestled in a small canyon, usually a haven of cool air and the sound of trickling water. But today, the air was stifling, and the silence was broken only by the buzz of flies. As she approached, she noticed something amiss. Two men, their faces hidden beneath wide-brimmed hats, were working near the springhead. They weren't ranch hands. Their clothes were too new, their movements too furtive. She urged her horse forward, calling out, "Hello? What are you doing?" The men froze, then turned, their expressions hard and unwelcoming. One of them stepped forward, blocking her path. "Just making sure everything's running smooth, ma'am," he said, his voice rough. "I live here," Sarah replied, her voice trembling slightly, but holding firm. "I know who works on this ranch." You aren't one of them. She dismounted, tethering her horse to a nearby scrub oak. Let me see what you're doing. The men exchanged nervous glances. It's nothing you need to worry about, the first man said, taking another step forward. Sarah didn't back down. She pushed past him, her heart pounding in her chest. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. They dammed the spring, diverting the water into a hidden channel that led away from the ranch. A network of pipes, crude and hastily constructed, snaked into the underbrush, disappearing towards Barlow's land. You're stealing our water, she accused, her voice rising. The men swore, their pretense of innocence gone. You saw nothing, one of them growled, grabbing her arm. Sarah struggled, fear lending her strength. She kicked out, connecting with his shin. He yelped, releasing her. The other man lunged, but she dodged him, scrambling for her horse. She managed to mount, her hands shaking so badly she almost dropped the reins. Tell Barlow this ain't over, she shouted as she wheeled her horse around, galloping back towards the ranch. The image of the diverted water, the stolen lifeblood of the land, burned into her mind. The setting sun cast long, menacing shadows, and for the first time since arriving at the ranch, Sarah felt truly afraid. Barlow's shadow stretched long and dark, threatening to engulf everything she had come to cherish. The storm and the dam. The wind howled like a banshee, clawing at the ranch house. Rain lashed against the windows, each gust threatening to shatter the glass. Sarah, jolted awake, sat up in bed, her heart hammering against her ribs. The electricity flickered and died, plunging the room into darkness punctuated only by the relentless flashes of lightning. Dusty was already gone. She found his side of the bed cold, the imprint of his body barely there. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through her. She pulled on her boots and a thick oilskin coat, then grabbed a lantern from beside the fireplace. The air inside felt stifling, but outside was a maelstrom. The creek, usually a gentle murmur, had become a raging torrent. As Sarah struggled against the wind towards the barn, she could hear the frantic cries of the livestock. The lower fields were already submerged, the water a churning, muddy brown. And then she saw it, a gaping hole in the dam. Dusty was there, silhouetted against the storm, his silhouette a stark contrast to the lightning behind him. He was directing several head of cattle towards higher ground, his voice barely audible above the roar. "Dusty!" she yelled, cupping her hands around her mouth. He turned, his face grim, his eyes reflecting the flickering light of the lantern. "The dam's breached. We gotta try and patch it before the whole thing goes." He didn't waste time explaining, just barked orders. Sarah, fueled by adrenaline and a growing sense of purpose, didn't hesitate. They worked in tandem, their movements clumsy but determined. Dusty wrestled fallen trees and large rocks into position, creating a makeshift barrier against the relentless onslaught of water. Sarah, shivering in the cold rain, filled burlap sacks with sand and gravel, her hands raw and bleeding. The mud sucked at their boots, threatening to pull them under. The wind tore at their clothes, trying to rip them from their bodies. Each wave that crashed against the dam seemed to mock their efforts, but they persisted. Hours blurred into a grueling, desperate dance against the elements. Dusty, his usual gruffness replaced by a focused intensity, kept glancing at Sarah, his eyes filled with a mixture of concern and respect. He saw her resilience, the quiet strength that belied her delicate frame. "Careful now," he'd shout, his voice hoarse, reaching out to steady her as she stumbled on the slick rocks. She didn't speak much, her energy focused on the task at hand, but each time his hand brushed against hers, a jolt of warmth shot through her, a tiny spark of hope in the overwhelming darkness. As dawn approached, painting the sky in bruised shades of purple and gray, the storm began to abate. The wind died down to a whimper, the rain softened to a drizzle. They stood side by side, exhausted and soaked to the bone, watching as the water level slowly began to recede. The makeshift barrier held. Dusty turned to Sarah, his face etched with exhaustion. Mud streaked his face, but his eyes held a newfound tenderness. He reached out, his calloused hand gently cupping her cheek. "You were incredible," he said, his voice rough with emotion. Sarah met his gaze, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and something more profound. She saw a vulnerability in his eyes, a crack in the armor he usually wore. "We did it together," she whispered, her voice barely audible. He didn't say anything more, but the look in his eyes spoke volumes. He pulled her close, holding her tight against his chest, and for the first time, Sarah felt truly safe, truly home. The storm had passed, leaving behind a trail of destruction, but it had also forged a bond between them, a bond that seemed stronger than any dam. A new dawn. The eastern sky shifted from plum to a vibrant blaze as the sun crested the ridge. A golden wash flooded the valley, revealing the impossible, the dam resurrected. Rebuilt, stronger than before, it stood as a monument to their combined will, born of desperation. The air, clear and sharp, carried the scent of pine and freshly turned earth. Sarah stood with Dusty on the porch, cradling a steaming mug. The tranquil water mirrored the dawn, painting the valley floor with shimmering hues. Dusty hadn't closed his eyes. Vigil had been his companion, listening for any tremor in the concrete bones of the dam. But held, just as Sarah had, despite every reason to flee. He turned to her. Her face, bathed in the nascent light, possessed a quiet beauty. The bruises were fading, yet shadows clung to her eyes, ghosts of the past she couldn't quite outrun. He yearned to erase them completely. He cleared his throat, the sound disruptive in the stillness. "We did it," he managed, the words falling short of the immense relief, a tidal wave threatening to overwhelm him. Sarah met his gaze. "We did." A small, genuine smile bloomed on her face, reaching the depths of her eyes. A smile he craved to witness every morning. He shifted, jamming his hands into his pockets. This was the excruciating part, exposing the raw vulnerability within. It felt like flaying himself, but the words demanded release. "Sarah," he began, his voice rough-edged. I haven't been the easiest man to share a life with. A creature of habit, a little rough around the edges." He faltered, searching for the key to unlock his heart without scaring her away. "You're authentic, Dusty," she countered softly, cutting him off. "And underneath it all, you're inherently good. More than you realize." He looked at her, surprised by her perception. "Good? I haven't exactly been showering you with affection." A light, airy laugh escaped her. "Goodness isn't always expressed through sweet words, Dusty. It resides in actions. It's about rebuilding the dam, about offering shelter when I was lost. It's about truly seeing me." He swallowed, his throat tight. "I see you, Sarah. I see everything you are. And I think I'm falling in love with you." The words felt inadequate, clumsy, yet undeniably true. He'd plunged, unprepared, into a depth of feeling he never imagined possible. Silence hung heavy between them, charged with unspoken emotions. He steeled himself for rejection, for her to call him foolish, too old, too damaged. Instead, she reached out, her hand gently caressing his cheek. Her touch was a spark of sunlight, warm and revitalizing. "You're not exactly a walk in the park to live with," she teased, a playful glint in her eyes. "But you're worth the effort." He closed his eyes, relishing the feel of her hand against his skin. "I was a fool, Sarah, allowing my past to shackle my future, erecting walls around my heart. You dismantled those walls. You healed me." She stepped closer, her eyes searching his with an intensity that made him tremble. "You heal me too, Dusty. You offer me sanctuary, a place to truly belong, a reason to believe in something good again." He framed her face with his hands, his thumbs tracing the curve of her cheekbones. "Don't ever doubt you belong here, Sarah. This is your home. You're my home." He leaned in, his lips meeting hers in a tentative exploration. Then, as she responded, her arms circling his neck, the kiss deepened, becoming a fervent expression of longing, hope, and the promise of a future intertwined. When they finally broke apart, breathless, the sun stood triumphant, bathing the valley in its radiant glow. The restored dam shimmered, a testament to their collective victory. Sarah smiled, a luminous, joyful smile that transformed her features. "So, what now?" she queried, her voice vibrant with anticipation. He took her hand, his grip steady and reassuring. "Now," he declared, "we build a life. Together." He surveyed the valley, the ranch that had once felt like a prison, now a sanctuary. "We start with breakfast," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "And then we figure out how to make this place and our lives even richer